After World War II, the world thought that peace would come. But the reality was quite the opposite. The war ended, but it divided the world into two major parts, the United States and the Soviet Union. This division was not just of land or power, but of thought and ideology. The United States said that freedom should be for everyone, that everyone should have the right to live the life they want, while the Soviet Union believed that only equality and control could bring justice to the world. These two ideologies clashed and came to the world in the form of the Cold War. This war was not actually fought with guns, but with fear, competition, and politics. Both powers had developed atomic bombs, and everyone was afraid that if one of them took the initiative, the world would end. This fear held humanity in check for decades. One of the most prominent moments of this Cold War was the Berlin Blockade. This happened in 1948 when the Soviet Union cut off the road to West Berlin. People began to crave food and supplies. At that time, the United States took a brilliant step. They delivered food and supplies by air. It was called the Berlin Airlift. Imagine what it would be like. Every day, hundreds of planes would descend from the sky and bring life-saving supplies to people. It was not just aid, but a message. We will not give up. Then in the 1950s, the Korean War broke out. North Korea was supported by the Soviet Union, while South Korea was supported by the United States. This war took millions of lives, but the result was still incomplete. The border remained the same. At the same time, another terrifying moment came, the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. The Soviet Union installed nuclear missiles in Cuba, which were very close to the United States. The world was on the brink of nuclear war moment by moment. One wrong decision, and everything was over. People were praying at that time that humanity would be saved. Fortunately, the leaders of both sides used their common sense and reached a compromise. The crisis ended, but the world realized for the first time that nuclear weapons were not just power, but another name for death. Meanwhile, another war was on the horizon, but this one was a war of ideas, the space race. The United States and the Soviet Union set out to conquer the skies. On one hand, the Russian Sputnik satellite surprised everyone, and on the other, the United States made history by sending a man to the moon. The real question behind all this was, who will lead the world? Who is more powerful? And this question was hidden at the root of the Cold War. But the competition was not only on the battlefield or in space. This war was also fought in hearts and minds. Through movies, music, sports, and propaganda, the two powers tried to humiliate each other. Ordinary people were also bearing the brunt of this war. Everyone was afraid that tomorrow a button might be pressed and the whole world would burn to ashes. This fear was passed down from generation to generation. Then came the 1980s. The Soviet Union's economy was weakening. On the one hand, the United States invested enormously in weapons. On the other hand, the Soviet Union began to collapse under its own weight. Finally, in 1989, the Berlin Wall fell, the wall that separated East and West. It was a sign that the Cold War era was coming to an end. A few years later, in 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed and the long night of the Cold War ended. So what was this event like? It was a war with fewer bombs and more fear. It began after 1947 and lasted until 1991. Its goal was not just to seize land or power, but to prove the superiority of ideas. And the biggest lesson is that sometimes it takes patience, reason, and dialogue to win a war, not bullets.